completely machinima. And now for something completely machinima. And now for something completely machinima.
Hello and welcome to And Now for Something Completely Machinima, the podcast about machinima, virtual production, and related technologies. I'm one of your hosts, Phil Rice, and I'm here with my co-hosts Tracy Harwood, Ricky Grove, and Damian Valentine.
Hello.
Happy New Year, everybody.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you. Happy New Year to our listeners as well. And we are in the, what is this now? Season 6 of this show?
Yes, season 6.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable.
Yeah. Wow.
So we start off today, we're going to be talking about a film like we usually do, but we're starting off on a bit of a somber note because a friend of ours in the machinima community, Frank Fox, has passed away kind of unexpectedly. And Ricky and I actually had the pleasure of working with him directly. There's a film that we all three worked on together that's named Morning Run Amok, which Frank wrote and directed, and he had some other voice actors involved as well, and he did it in MovieStorm. It was actually one of the highlights of the MovieStorm era, if you ask me. Just his very relatable and quaint sense of humor and kind of restrained. The whole thing was basically a series of jokes, but framed within this kind of loose story structure. C.J. Ambrosia, who was well known for his machinima work in the Grand Theft Auto games, he featured as a performer in that as well, and this is in what, 2006 or two? It was very early in the kind of second phase of machinima, and he was doing basically a vlogger, a video podcaster that's getting on there to basically complain about everything that's wrong with the world, right? And CJ just really hammed it up. So we really enjoyed working on that with Frank. There's one scene in particular that I'm fondest of where it was Frank and Ricky and I think we were positioned near like a hot dog stand or something, and there was some joke that we did. So Frank didn't just do MovieStorm machinima. He did machinima in Grand Theft Auto. He, of course, did it in MovieStorm. And then he's been kind of behind, out of the main scene for a while, and yet still, if you look on his channel, still making the occasional machinima film. He did some Fallout builds of like bases, custom bases in the game Fallout. He had huge presence in Second Life as a live music performer. And he actually kind of he had been a musician for a long time. Very talented singer guitarist, kind of reminded me a little bit of like James Taylor, kind of a folk singer approach, just very relaxed and smooth. And he performed for quite some time with a Second Life avatar under the name Frank Leonatra, and then later just went straight to I believe it was Twitch was his main platform. And he just would get on and he'd develop this little fan base that would show up and he'd play live. I was very fortunate to get to sit in on a handful of those, and even requested a song at his last, the most recent performance that I was at. I actually got one of my requests in, and he sang a Billy Joel song. So he's just a wonderful guy, radiated positivity. He was, there's not many true romance stories in the world of machinima that I know of. There's a few, but he and Michelle Petitme, am I pronouncing her last name right, Tracy? Yeah.
Yep.
Who originally was from the UK and was an extremely talented filmmaker in that same Machinima era using The Sims 2. The name that her filmmaking banner that she used was Britannica Dreams. And one of her films, Ricky had a massive hand in handling the sound, and it was just a beautiful, this based on an old fairy tale called The Snow Witch. Just delightful. And that was just one of many just gorgeous films. Well, somehow, I don't know exactly the story of how they met. Maybe we can get that story sometime. But he was in California or somewhere in the U.S. and originally, and she was in the UK. Somehow they met and they ended up married. And she survives him now. Is out in California. So we're sad, very sad. It was very unexpected. There's not really any other details I think that we even know or would want to talk about here, but we certainly do send our thoughts to Michelle and Frank was just such a nice guy, and it's just sad to see someone go.
Yeah, earlier than they should.
Yes. Yeah. So we're probably going to spend a little more time talking about Frank's work in a little more detail and his overall influence in an upcoming episode where we're talking about news and events and stuff. So, but I just wanted to mention that now because it really it's very recent that happened, and it was very sudden, and I know it touched a lot of people in the community. He had a positive impact on a lot of people in this craft. So he will be sorely missed.
He was one of the good ones.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Yes. A really good guy. So speaking of Machinima from that era, Ricky has a pick that actually is one that made its way into the Machinaplex collection many years ago, right around that same time period. And it's one of my absolute all-time favorites. It's just beautiful. Ricky, tell us about this one.
Sure. Well, I was swimming through the mediocrity part of the archive.org Machinima collection. And it's like looking in your drawer through a bunch of junk and finding a diamond. And I immediately saw it and remembered the first time I saw this film. It was by Tobias Lundmark, and it's called Among Fables and Men, released in 2007, created in Warcraft. Now, I've never really been that impressed with Warcraft, but my God, it doesn't make any difference what kind of canvas it is. When you've got a true artist, they create wonderful stuff. And this film was made, how did I describe it? It's an unusual machinima because it was composited in World of Warcraft using a kind of cutout animation style. And it's essentially the story of a guy who suddenly awakes in the middle of an unknown forest. And he has no memories of how he got there or who he is. And so the short film's about 5 minutes, is his discovering it, and a nice little twist ending. I can't tell you how much I love this movie. It is so smart. He updated the version on archive.org. He said that he remastered the sound, remade the ending, fixed some scenes with better compression and new download links. And he said that he calls it an experimental machinima because it's composited and it has that cutout animation style. And he says that the original inspiration came from the guy who did the music for the machinima, who's just terrific, Jan Nuricabe van der Krissen. I think that's how you pronounce it. And he was inspired by that. And also there was a bit of the style inspired by a Newgrounds Flash series called Timelessness. He said he created it in 10 days. and he had an extreme loss of sleep towards the end.
No.
So you can sort of imagine why it was so. The ending is kind of surreal and disassociated. But what I like about this movie, this short film, is what I like about all of the great machinima is that it's original. It's just brilliantly edited and smartly created. The story isn't substantial, but it doesn't need to be. It's beautiful in a way that you don't see Warcraft films being that beautiful. It doesn't have any dialogue, which I think was smart because I didn't have to worry about actors or recording any of that stuff. There are some sound effects, although they're limited. It's mostly music and visuals. And I found myself just drawn into it once again. I mean, I'm in one place, 5 minutes later, I'm in an entirely different place. It has that kind of effect on you, you know? It's smart, it's unique, it's leagues ahead of other Warcraft machinima and machinima of the time. You could show this if this was a short film in between big Hollywood movies, people would love it. It's just great. I'm curious to see what you guys think of it and a little of your background work that you always do, Tracy.
Do you want me to go next then?
Sure. I want you to do whatever it is you want to do, Tracy.
I'm happy to, unless other wants to jump in.
Well, I do have a quick thing I want to add because
Cool.
this animation style, I believe they call it a motion comic, where it's like a comic and the characters don't necessarily move very much. Like they're not moving their arms or legs or anything, but they move around the screen and the background, things will change. And it's kind of got that kind of style to it. And the other thing I noticed is there's a style of image and videos that was people were experimenting with where you have some black lines down the middle of the screen. And if you use them correctly, you can make it feel like the images are popping out at you. It's like a 3D effect without it being one of those obnoxious over-the-top 3D effects. And this is one of those films that uses it really well.
Thank you.
Two points
I've got more to say, but I'll let Tracy go.
No, well, I neither of those points are things I'd actually picked up on, but I see where you're coming from that. Yeah. Okay, so this won Best Drama in the Warcraft movies The Fabled Few competition, which I think was an online event. It was entered in 2007. And I guess between it being uploaded to the archive, which Henry Lowood did in 2011, and it actually being released, my guess is it sat on primarily the Warcraft movies server and possibly a Vimeo channel in those kind of intervening years. And then, of course, Dopefish, Tobias's alias, he's uploaded it to his own YouTube channel, which he did about 15 years ago in 2010. So there are YouTube links that I'll put out there. My guess is Henry would have uploaded it around about the same time that he was editing the Machinima Reader book with Michael Nietzsche. I don't know whether it's actually mentioned in that book. I didn't bother to look, but my guess is there's probably a mention of it in there. And most likely, I would say, because of the unique aesthetic style that you've identified. I actually think it's a really interesting machinima. It's what I'd call highly experimental in style. It's told in a form which seems to be akin to me to Japanese no theatre, which is spiritual puppet theatre, but with digital marionettes. I think what's so fascinating about this actually is the combination of animation, because elements of it are animated, and these, as you said, cut out like 2D characters that are moving around in this 3D space, which represents, in some ways, more of a storyboard than a film. I hadn't come across your motion graphic term, Damien.
Motion comic.
Motion comic, yeah. Well, another aspect that I had come across, of course, is graphic novel, and the Newgrounds reference is actually to a Flash graphic novel series, which I think is because it's an English graphic novel. I would guess it's called Tamesis, as in the Thames, Thamesis. And that still exists online, so I can put a link out to that as well, so you can have a look at how that has influenced this particular work. I think the aim is evidently to be driven primarily by these visuals, but I think what's the most outstanding part of this is the sound design, because it's really that which drives the story, or at least it's the sound design that drives it for me. And I think why that's quite interesting is because although he says it's inspired by Tamesis, and you can definitely see the connections there, as you said, the original inspiration was mostly from listening to Nuricabe's music. Nuricabe, of course, was the composer, as you said, Jan van der Kruisen, who has written music for various games, including the Knit stories, Stray, and various kind of puzzles. He's prolific, in fact. And again, I can give you a couple of links to the Knit stories, and you'll see there's a kind of an aesthetic link almost to that as well. I actually also found a run through of the game, which includes some of that, the music, and again, I can give you a link to that. Now, I was really quite interested because I immediately thought Japanese puppetry when I saw this, for a couple of reasons, really. But it sort of made me think I need to do a little bit more digging on Nuricabe, because it turns out I think there is a connection there as well. It's that name is actually a mystical creature from Japanese folklore, which is depicted in yokai manga. It's a form that's usually associated with an invisible wall that blocks the path of travelers as they walk, or is mist that falls and disorientates the traveler, where basically what you've got is obstruction without explanation, roads ending abruptly, and progress becoming kind of impossible. And then there's this association with the sense of a liminal presence, where something appears to be in between spaces, and of psychological unease from sort of fear of confusion more than kind of violence, and basically a warning to a traveller not to stray carelessly. And I think that's how he then linked this to Lewis Carroll's Alice in Wonderland, where Alice encounters basically these worlds which bend logic, and, language slips, space behaves kind of unpredictably, sizes and, change, if you like, rules are kind of illogical. And Alice is kind of always moving and falling and wandering and searching for direction. And to that end, you've got this sort of sense of, discomfort or cognitive dissonance in the way that these rules keep changing mid-thought. And that comes through quite strongly, I think, in the content of the story that's being told here. And I feel that what you're seeing with this is a tension in the representations, told both through the sound design and the visuals, where basically this Nurikabe's influence is evidently saying to the central character, just don't proceed. And Carol's influence is saying, well, you can go ahead, nothing's going to make sense anyway. And that to me is how this story unfolds, because nothing really makes sense to me. Among Fables and Men, as the description states, it's a story, as you said, Ricky, about a man who suddenly awakes and he's kind of lost. He doesn't know where he is. He doesn't know how he's got there. And there's bits of what then unfolds, which I think are really quite terrifying, like a real nightmare. And then there's bits of what you see, which are really quite uplifting and ventureful. But I don't really fully understand what the tale's about. other than the fact that you might say it's reminiscent of life in general, the ups and downs of good and less good days, I guess. And it could be therefore meaningful to folks in any way whatsoever. I think anybody can interpret this in any way they choose, which is basically what Dopefish says in the description. To that point, I think it's really quite masterful. And it's interesting because it's using World of Warcraft to sort of represent those mystical elements and which really are quite central to the storytelling. And I think it's interesting too because we've seen Japanese influenced machinimas previously. In fact, Phil, you mentioned it earlier. The Snow Witch was a Japanese tale. And that had been made in The Sims and actually, ironically, released just a year before this film. And, you know, The Snow Witch won Best Film at the festival that I directed in 2007. But whereas The Snow Witch was narrated, which I think was an outstanding quality of that film, this one is not. I think probably the original intention was that it possibly would include voice acting. However, there were clearly, I think, timing issues, given that this film was made in just 10 days for this contest. And I actually found a call out for voice actors, but evidently that just didn't happen. Anyway, I think ultimately just the music and sound design was really quite an inspired decision because it really adds to the intensity of the story.
Really?
Where I think as much of it is in the imagination as it is on the screen. So I'd say this is not a film. I'd say this is not a graphic novel in any way, but it's a kind of orally visual novella. I imagine it's something that Peter Greenaway, in his kind of quite controversial comments, would have been really interested to see when he was talking to the Machinima community in about 2010. His comments were really, really about encouraging creators to foster the unique creative expression that can only really be demonstrated through something like machinima, because it just does not mimic existing cultural formats. And I think this is unique in that sense. So, as to making this, I think I was a little unsure about some of the comments on the archive, which I kind of had to have a little look at. I suspect there are some points in translation to note. I had thought that this was solely made by Dopefish, but part of the description also makes reference to someone by the name of Muller05. Now, Muller05 or Mads Lund was in fact the developer of the WoW Machinima tool, which provided these advanced kind of camera control and animation features that are not natively available in the game. So the tool basically allowed users to detach the in-game camera and set up the motion paths for filming. So I think what this is too is Dopefish paying homage to the mod creator he used to capture some of the footage with. Now, this guy, Mallower05, has created similar tools for other games around about the same time, and you can see some of that work on his channel, and I'll put a link to that so that you can check out that as well. But I think I don't really know too much more about the technicalities of it, so I'll let you guys talk about the technicalities of how it's done, and to Damien's point about this black line effect, which was really a very interesting way of moving between scenes, I think. There's lots to like in this. I don't think I've ever seen anything quite like it. It was, very interesting and novel at the time it was released, and it still is. I'd like to see more of this kind of work, I think, really. So
Yeah, me too.
Great pick.
Yeah, so the motion comic style, there isn't a lot of it done. Partly because it's an incredibly difficult thing to do. Like it's
I bet.
very time consuming. In a lot of ways, it's easier to have fully animated characters because you're not having to, you know, get their separate image and then move them around and all of that kind of stuff. It's also the handful of examples I've seen in that style are also I don't want to just put them down, but let's say they're not necessarily the best productions. So this film is actually one of the best examples of the motion comic style that I've seen. Um, and there's not that much of it. I like the idea of it, but it's an incredible amount of work to get it right and to get it this good. So I can appreciate that a huge amount of work must have gone into this film, and it's only like 5 minutes long. Um, but yeah, I wouldn't be able to say how long he worked on it. Putting it all together.
Mm.
I think the choice of not having dialogue was actually the right one. This is one of those films where if they had speaking characters or narration, it would have taken away from it. So I'm kind of glad that call for voice actors, which I didn't know about until you mentioned it, Tracy. I'm glad that didn't work out because I
Mm.
think the film was better for it. And maybe the lack of voice actors, kind of pushed him into adjusting the story to make it work without voice actors, because obviously he had a plan and a script in place for what he
Mm.
wanted them to say. So not having that, maybe he had to make some changes that forced him to adjust it. I don't know because I wasn't part of that film process, but I think he was very successful in what he endeavored to do. As for the black bars, it's the idea is you have in I'm getting my fingers right. You have like two bars around about here, so in the middle. And as you have objects moving, especially in the middle frame, it can make them kind of come out at the screen at you. It's not going to work with my hands. It tends to have to work to be black bars. But like if they had black bars like here, and I move my face like that, it would be like my face was coming out of the screen at you, because it's something to do with um, perspective. Because the bars obviously don't move, but the object inside is. So it kind of
It's an
tricks the
optical
brain.
illusion, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
yeah. Um, there was a lot of that around for a while, and it seems to have been one of those things that's faded away. But that was one of those things I really enjoyed people experimenting with and seeing what ideas they'd come up with. It's obviously another really good example of it you used effectively. Usually it was things coming out at you, but in this film, it's things kind of moving along. Like
Mm.
there's a hand coming out, and it kind of goes between the bars, and it feels like the hand is coming out of the screen, not at the
Right.
audience, but just part of the world that you're in
Yeah.
rather than on screen. Um, so again, another very effective use of visual style that um, isn't used very much anymore. But I think it obviously worked really well here.
Mm.
I think anime borrows this technique a little bit when they want to go cheap. For example, they don't want to do a full animation of a particular character and a full animation of everybody in the background. So they'll do a cutout of the character moving, and the background is static. And that'll be just for like in a scene where they cut from a different camera angle. They'll save money by doing that technique on a particular cut. So I see that technique in anime a lot, just to save money, but not used for an entire film. That's what makes this particularly unique. And I think that perspective thing that you were talking about adds an eeriness to
Mm.
the visuals that I think fits the theme really, really smartly.
Yeah.
Yeah, what's really interesting about that, thinking of that technique as a cost-cutting one in the world of anime is just the fact that it just so happens it works. Like it doesn't break your suspension of disbelief. It doesn't feel out of place. If you're looking for it, you'll notice it, right? But it works. You get the idea, and that kind of clean efficiency is something that's very interesting about anime, and you can see it in the way that they handle face expressions a lot of times as well. I commented as much on whose was it? Big Trek's latest Forbidden Planet chapter. If you haven't seen it, go see it. It's really good. And he what I noticed on it was that he didn't have to have these very complex keyframed face motions. You capture certain key poses of the face essentially, and that's totally an anime technique. Like you don't see someone slowly scrunch their face. It's a lot of it's almost jumpy at first, but once your eyes adjust to it, it's like, okay, I'm getting the emotion. I'm getting what I'm supposed to get from it. So yeah, that clean efficiency, which it is funny, Ricky, because it is true that a lot of those things were done for efficiency purposes because it's so labor intensive to do these things. But how interesting that it also just so happened, like if they had just chosen to do it artistically, the effect would have been the same because it works. So I think some of the black bar usage in here, what it reminded me of is from that webcomic motif, the idea of a pane, a comic pane being divided up into sections so that you can actually expand how much of the story that you're telling in one frame, right? And I think sometimes it was used with that intent as well, that it was a way to expedite the story rather than have three separate shots in a row, right? And it was very effectively done.
And very fascinating visually, too. Very exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the reason that it worked so well in this film in particular is because it felt so deliberate. It didn't feel like, this will be a time saver. It was, no, this is the best way to communicate the story and keep the energy where I need it to be for this part of the story. So, yeah, it's just beautiful. And I think the music is just exquisite.
Isn't it?
And his use of sound, it was sparse, but there was nowhere that I thought, oh, that could use some more sound. Like he covered everything that needed to be there, and all the quality and the stereo. If you get a chance to watch this film with headphones, do so, because whoever mixed this really knows about the stereo mix of placement and width of the sounds, all the ambient sounds, the page turns, everything's just crisp and very professional.
Hard to believe that it was a 10-day production.
Yeah, that's astonishing. That's astonishing. I'm not sure how much of the tool you were mentioning, Tracy, that Madsland developed. I can see some shots in here that had to be done with a tool like that. But much of this, I feel like there's a decent chance he used the same Warcraft model viewer that Jason Choi used in Edge of Remorse, which had a lot of 2D imagery put into a 3D landscape. And Jason's style is different from this and very effective as well. But I think maybe that's how some of these just exact poses, and then he cuts them out, and then
well, he says he uses Adobe After Effects.
Okay. But actually I'm saying to capture the imagery, he probably used the Warcraft tool. But yeah, I'm sure he used After Effects for the compositing. And the compositing is just wonderful because it's not just two-dimensional. You could totally tell this story, just have it be a flat 2D world, but every once in a while it feels like we're moving into the screen. The scenery's coming at you, the forest is parting and splitting.
I remember at one point there was a medallion that was in the middle of the scene, and his hand comes out and wraps around the medallion, and it seems like it comes right into your space. That 3D effect was just marvelous.
Yeah. Well, he used some composited depth of field as well, very effectively, to just give this real sense of depth and breadth to the world. So it's just gorgeous, and it's an amazing achievement for frankly 10 months. I would still go, wow, that doesn't surprise me. But 10 days is just unbelievable. And I had some of those sessions in my late 20s. I don't think I could pull that off today.
Me neither.
And you start to get kind of loopy, and so if that influenced the kind of otherworldly nature of it, it wouldn't surprise me. So just a wonderful pick, Ricky. Thank you for
You're welcome.
reminding all of us of this great film.
It's a great film. It's a landmark in top 10 machinima.
It's a Lundmark top 10.
It's a Tobias
Lundmark,
landmark.
yeah.
That's right.
One last thing I wanted to mention, and that is the word style. American culture has been so influenced by television and cinema, in which a style predominates, and that's the style realism. Many people don't realize that realism is a style because it makes you think that what you're seeing is real. But in reality, it's a style of presentation that gives you the illusion of reality. Well, the same thing can happen when you don't use realistic techniques, like in this film. There's jump cuts, there's 3 panels that information is happening. Can you imagine if this style was put to the service of, say, the television series Severance, which is excessively realistic to the point of boredom, I have to say. But so the point I'm trying to make is that if you're a machinima filmmaker, you don't necessarily have to always do something that's realistic. Style can be very important, and you develop your own style, your own way of telling a story. And that's what Tobias Dopefish Lundmark did in this wonderful film. And I hope everybody watches it and is inspired to create their own style.
I want to add something to that, Ricky, because you're right. This style is very unique, but it's made the film not age visually. If a
There
film
you go.
made with the most realistic game engine at the time, whatever that would be, I can't think of it off the top of my head, or whatever platform, went
Would age.
ultra realistic style that they could, that would age really badly, yeah. Whereas this, you can watch it now and it feels fresh.
Yep, it does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Well, I'm really glad you all liked it, and thanks for your comments.
Well, audience, if you've got comments for us, we'd love to hear them. You can drop a comment wherever you're watching or listening, if comments are supported there, or drop us an email at talk@completelymachinima.com. I'm Phil Rice, and on behalf of my co-hosts, Damian, Ricky, and Tracy, we wish you a great day.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.